Welcome everyone to this great panel that we're going to be having this afternoon in the Middle East. And a warm greetings to everyone out there that is watching us globally and has had the chance to tune in into the session overall. It's quite a bright and sunny afternoon here in the Middle East today. Thank you all for tuning in. And I'm glad to be here with my industry colleagues to be able to talk to us about a very important topic that has been touching us very closely this year around resiliency. Now, the way that we will conduct this panel is in a session where I'll start to introduce the overall topic to all of us, to the audience overall. Then we'll have introductions from our panelists who have joined us today to talk to us about the topic overall. And then we're going to go through a few key topics of discussion around the overall topic itself, around cyber resiliency and so forth. We'll open it up closer to the end of the session to take any questions that you may have from the audience, any thoughts that you would like to share and bounce off us, and then we'll look to wrap up the session towards the close of the hour, and so on and so forth overall. Speaking about the topic in terms of cyber resiliency, obviously its core as it touches us, as this year has been quite different from all the other years that we have experienced, and nobody, plans for the type of experience that we've all had this year overall. Now, speaking about resiliency, when it comes to organizations and cybersecurity in general, we also play a huge part in terms of maintaining resiliency within organizations during such events. The events that we have been experiencing this year are obviously physical in nature. It has caused massive disruption globally speaking. There are different figures floating around globally. Some of them are quite scary, quite astounding. One of the ones that I have heard is that global poverty or the global population, 10% of the population is roughly shifted down into poverty due to the overall situation in the pandemic. So as you can see, the overall consequences of something is staggering. And when it comes to organizations and the clients that we're serving and the organization that we're working, it's important for us to also look at this from a cyber perspective. And this is what we'll be talking about today: is how have we been able to maintain resiliency, and how can we continue to maintain resiliency and continue to operate the business that we are all responsible for within our organizations during such times and so forth. A great introduction of our panelists, including myself. My name is Ali Khan. I'm a director within PwC MiddleEast, and I lead our managed threat detection and response services within Middle East and North Africa region overall. In addition to this, I am also a volunteer CISO at Refugee Girls Worldwide. Refugee Girls Worldwide is a not-for-profit organization that is vision is to serve refugee girls, as the name states, that have been displaced during circumstances such as ours or other scenarios. And I also provide instructional and educational services to York University in Canada, where I teach cybersecurity overall to new and aspiring students in cyber. Along with myself, I'm glad to have my industry colleagues with me today, who I'll be having a great conversation with overall. We have Khalid Khan with us. Khalid Khan has over 30 years of experience within the field, quite diversified overall, and heads up cybersecurity services for Cisco within Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So that's quite a huge territory you have here, Khalid, and would be glad to hear from you. How you kind of maintain resiliency across these three major regions overall. We also have Hadi Anwar with us as a panelist today. Hadi Anwar is the Group Chief Information Officer, Group 2. Group 42 is a UAE amalgamation of multiple organizations that primarily heads artificial intelligence, AI, cloud computing services, information technology services, health, manufacturing, and other different divisions of businesses within the region itself. Glad to have you here, Hadi, as well, and really look forward to discussing the topics at large today that we have. Also like to welcome Dawood Behbehani. Dawood Behbehani is the Assistant Head of Information Security at Kuwait International Bank. Kuwait International Bank is a leading bank within the region that has a stable record of diversified growth with multiple portfolios and investments within the region. Dawood, great to have you here, and really look forward to our conversation around the topic and discussing forward. Now, the way that we'll speak about this and we'll take our conversation is we'll start from the beginning and kind of travel through across the months towards where we are today and start to get to hear some of those thoughts and so forth overall. So when we take a look at what's happened and what we've experienced, let's roll the clocks back a little bit back into the February timeframe, right? And that's when the Middle East had started to get a little bit more aware around the activity that was happening. Certain countries had started to shift focus, from Europe all the way coming into Asia and Middle East and so forth. And roughly when we get into March, that's when we in the Middle East have actually started to experience governments and organizations starting to implement protocols around lockdown procedures and starting to shift operations into ways that organizations have never done operations primarily. We all know within the Middle East that the culture of face-to-face interactions and business being done face-to-face is relatively quite high and quite well received when it comes to other methods and so forth. So obviously this was something unplanned for, something really new in the environment. However, come mid-March, we experienced the lockdowns within the region. We experienced remote protocols being implemented. And one of the things that I think we'd like to start off with is to kind of get your thoughts around how have you seen that time period within your experiences, within your organizations, within your clients that you serve, and within your organization overall? What were some of the key factors that you took during that time from a cyber resiliency perspective, and what are some of the overall experiences around that time? Let's start off with you, Khalid. Let's get to hear your thoughts around this, and enlighten us on your overall experience on this.
Sure. Thank you, Ali, for the introduction. Thank you, everybody. So yes, I think it was one of the most interesting times that we've ever lived through. I've never seen anything like this ever before. I have a team of consultants that serve from Moscow to Cape Town, so it's a pretty wide geography. We had some very interesting, events going on. One of the key things that we did in terms of corporate social responsibility was that we mobilized a team that was actually there to do two things. We set up field hospitals, which were our key, achievement for us as an organization. And the other thing was to look after our own staff and our customers. So we created SWAT teams that were able to look to see how quickly we could get remote working set up. One of the biggest trends we saw was the fact that there were a number of people stuck in certainly my team in locations that they should have been flying back from, and were stuck in those places in hotels they couldn't move. That created a very interesting dynamic, both from a personal perspective and a family perspective. And so we had to be mindful of that. But certainly one of the key things we have done is the remote worker. And we invented solutions that would allow us to do remote working with what we call remote hands. So we had field teams that were able to look at our customers from the closeness of the customer. And we had teams of experts that could do remote hands. So we created this concept as well that worked really well. The other thing that certainly became apparent is that there was a lack of cybersecurity preparedness. So whilst everybody did availability, BCP DR planning, typical scenarios, tabletop exercises, one of the things they lacked and hadn't really incorporated most of our customers was the fact that cybersecurity tabletop exercises within a BCP DR planning wasn't there. So as we started creating more of the remote workforce, the remote worker concept, and created far bigger bandwidth for that, we also found ourselves and our customers being hit by malware and by cybersecurity type of intrusions that hadn't been part of a typical, a normal BCP DR planning for some of the organizations. So that was an interesting event. And I think one of the key mega trends that we see, certainly as a company and a fairly large company at this, is far bigger trend towards two things. We see managed services becoming more prevalent, and we see cloud services being important. And we've seen this mega trend now appear as well for our customers. We are helping most of our customers looking at how they could create a much better, in working environment using cloud to help as well. And ultimately creating, potential tabletop exercise that incorporate remote worker threat types. So the threat modeling was different. The whole concept changed. And we see mega trends that ultimately impacted our regions differently. We saw far bigger outbreaks in Western Europe, in UK, where I am. I'm in UK right now. And I saw a much, easier to work with culture in certain other regions of Europe. So there were very different dynamics. The lockdowns had different rules. So you couldn't, if you flew somewhere, if our consultants were in some country and they originated from another one, they had, a different connotation. So really corporate social responsibility was a key thing that, we did at Cisco, ensuring field hospitals, making sure that key services were supported. And we did that with our SWAT teams. And that was our key purpose with governments as well.
Great. Yeah. And Khalid, I think one of the points that you touched upon that I really took note of is the whole notion around cyber threats at home. You mentioned that with the remote workforce, obviously, the introduction of the cyber threats making their way into home networks, and not just being able to cause disruption on the organizational front, but also being able to potentially damage personal data, which would be sitting at home with people bringing work home.
Absolutely. So one of the key trends is, where is the network edge? Where is the network? No longer is the network edge, necessarily based on your laptop. So the other thing we've done is created access to services that are a combination of cloud, on-premise, off-premise. So the devices that you own, the BYOD, these devices aren't necessarily owned by a corporate, so they have very little endpoint protection. And so we see anytime, anywhere concepts being more relevant. And so access is key. Connectivity is becoming incredibly important. Availability is obviously important. And so what we've seen is that that's where we had initially a sort of a boundary. You had your corporate assets, they sat in your organization, they belong to you. What we're seeing, certainly in Western Europe more so than in the Middle East, is that those assets don't necessarily have to belong to you. As long as your workforce can have access to the workload, wherever that workload is, it doesn't matter. As long as they can get access to it, so multi-cloud domains, access to those domains, the network edge is now everywhere. There's no real concept of having to have your own laptop to connect to those services now. So that's another big mega trend that we see as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's great. And, glad to hear some of these, key kind of findings that you went through as an experience overall. I'm sure obviously there's a lot more into this that you've been seeing, obviously from a financial sector as well, and bringing be able to bring work back home. But what are your thoughts around this? I mean, how has the experience been on your end?
Thank you, Ali. First of all, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation. During back in March, we had to, in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to rethink our cybersecurity tactics. We had numerous concerns. We've never seen something like this before. We initially thought that the coronavirus would be something similar to for example, the Ebola or the MERS virus, where it will be contained and eradicated at that time. But that was not the case. As soon as we saw a high spike in infection rates within China's neighboring country, that's when we thought that, no, this is something serious and we need to prepare ourselves and embrace for what is coming. Our primary focus at that time were concluded into four things. The first and foremost was the health and safety of our staff. And then the second concern was how to sustain business operations that can fulfill our day-to-day operations. And then we also took into consideration, the impacting efficiency due to the, potential absence of, high numbers of workforce. And then the fourth concern was the form of cyber attacks that the attackers would leverage during this period, because attackers would see these things as a golden ticket in order to, to breach organizations such as financial organizations. So the first thing we did when we saw those high numbers, the management executed an entire COVID-19 response strategy. So they created like some sort of a steering committee. That was a cross-functional committee led by C-suite members. And then we looked at different COVID-19 risk scenarios. So we executed an entire risk assessment, a thorough one, in order to identify those potential risks and identify impacts. And then the third thing we did is that we reviewed the entire business continuity procedure. And I totally agree with Mr. Khalid. Initially, at that time, the procedures that were in place was to have a business continuity whereby if the physical location of the place was not accessible, we'd move to another site. But in COVID-19, it was an entirely different situation. You just couldn't have the same people in the same place. You had to apply social distancing. So that's when we had to re-review the entire thing, revamp it, ensure that proper procedures were in place. And then we also conducted tabletop exercise. And I'm so glad that we did that, because we were able to identify some gaps in the existing procedures that were rectified. And then in terms of identifying potential cyber attacks, we executed a threat intelligence gathering. So basically, we went and tried to identify potential attacks targeting, for example, China and the other neighboring countries, because we wanted to get a taste of what form of attacks are happening in order to protect ourselves, because it's a trend. If it's hitting them, it's probably going to hit us once we are in the same situation. So that really gave us the edge, and we were able to successfully, let's say, steer away from a business operation catastrophe.
Great. And I think, Dawood, there's some great points that you've touched upon, and really glad to look at some of these things. I think one of the main things you mentioned around there is that, even from a cyber perspective, you had involved C-suite, right? I mean, this is getting the business actually involved in making some of those, so some key decisions to enable, cyber resiliency during this time overall. And some of the other topics I think that you also touched upon was the fact that running these drills. I mean, when it comes to event like these, you have to drill, right? And enabling these would be these factors. So glad to hear on such resilience measures that have been taken place, and glad that overall things have been great, and the workforce has been able to mobilize remotely as a part of these protocols that have been enabled. Hadi, how about yourself? I mean, when it comes to that time frame back in March, what have you seen as part of your experience in terms of enabling that resiliency during that really unknown time? That this was the beginning of everything, right?
First of all, thank you, Ali and CyberX, for giving me the opportunity to come and talk with this experienced panel. I don't need to look far. I'll give you my personal example. I was stuck in Riyadh in a hotel room for 3 months while being onboarded for this new job at Group 42. I joined Group 42 from NEOM, and the entire experience of being onboarded as a remote worker, was phenomenal, because we never expect laptops to be shipped to you in a hotel room and you can't do anything, and you have to start getting to know your team members. So the security controls mindset, the entire culture in the Middle East had to turn around. I've been here for 15 years. I know how open we are in terms of meeting, seeing, feeling, talking, shaking hands. All of that had to change 180 degrees. And we now had to work from our rooms, our desks, wherever we are in the world. the fact that we grew as an organization, we doubled our numbers, which means everybody had to be onboarded from across the globe. It wasn't an easy thing to do. And obviously, we had to change our onboarding procedures. We had to look at cloud aspects as to how we can ensure that our new joiners are given a very streamlined process of coming on board. With all of that put in place, we also looked at what security controls we may put in place. Simple things like printing an onboarding form and signing a confidential data, right? We don't have digital signatures. Not everybody has that. So these are the controls we started to put in place. MDM wasn't there. So we started to look at that. How do we remote control our endpoints to ensure they have the right patches installed? People have been given endpoints with all the updates, antiviruses. So as simple as an updated antivirus and how we control it remotely from a central location, from somebody onboarding in New York, for example, in the Middle East, is not an easy thing. And we never thought about all these controls from day one. Simple thing like laptops not being available in the market. I'm coming from a bank. In a bank, we don't give laptops to everybody in the organization. People come and work from a security standpoint. We come and work on our desktops. So there was a point where there were no laptops in the market. All the suppliers were short of laptops. So we had to look at other options. And I think Khalid mentioned the aspect of cloud computing. I think some of the cloud service providers really capitalized on that, and rightly so. I think this is a good time for all of us to look into that. But when I say cloud computing, I also consider security controls which go alongside cloud computing, because some of the organizations, such as ourselves, are very concerned about data sovereignty, right? We need to understand where is the data being stored, where is the data going? Is it in the UAE? Is it in the Middle East? Is it globally somewhere? What are the controls from that perspective also? So we had to look into cloud computing in further detail as well. Now, working from home culture is a different, as I mentioned to you earlier, is a different ball game altogether for a country like UAE. We are based in Abu Dhabi. Some of our colleagues are based in Dubai. They couldn't come to the office. So we had to start understanding how we can get them working with us in a normal manner. So these are a few things, we actually went through, and obviously now we're in a position that wherever you are in the world, we can have VPNs in place, endpoint protection in place, everything's encrypted. So all those security controls are in place. And I think this has taught us a lot of lessons, and rightly so. I mean, as a cyber professional, I feel that this was required to be, happen to us, because our controls are from this level, have gone to this level. So I'm very happy as a cyber guy that, the organizations have welcomed this change, and we have to go through this.
Yeah. And Hadi, absolutely. I mean, some of the great points that you've touched upon is, it's not just laptops, but now the dependency on mobile and mobiles in general obviously increased as part of this scenario. And also digital trust. I mean, within the Middle East, we are accustomed to having physical signatures. Sometimes we need stamps, right? We need documents that need to be stamped. But now we have to adopt to the digital trust and the balance around trusting digital signatures. And I guess maybe Dawood, on your side, on the financial services, there must have been some shifts around digital trust, being able to provide some of these services, or at least signing authorities digitally as opposed to handwritten signatures.
Of course, yes. We had to explore, other methods that was not just acceptable in terms of security, but also acceptable in terms of regulatory requirements. That regulatory and legal requirement that you can accept that signature if it's electronic based. So yes, indeed.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. Great. All right. Let's try to take the clock back a little bit forward. Let's now get into the months that the new normal is being adopted. Right. So. Now we move from March. We've already gone into April. April is that that brand new lockdown scenarios happening across the region, and then starting into June, back through into the months of the festive seasons in the in the Islamic calendar that we have in the region, we start to experience, people adopting to this new normal, right? And now we're talking into the core summer months. These are the months of roughly mid-June to mid-August or end of August, roughly speaking. I'd like to understand from your side around, any changes in business continuity adopted during the adoption of the new normal. What were some of the key kind of factors that were considered on the cyber perspective from your side when it came to the new normal? And Khalid, it will be good to kind of hear from you on this and kind of seeing how you worked with your clients within your organization, with your experience around these these months where the new normal was being adopted from a resiliency perspective.
So I think one of the real beautiful things is that I saw different things in different regions. And that I live in Dubai, I work in Dubai 10 years or so, and even more since 1998. And the differences are amazing. So Western Europe didn't have a huge impact. It's much more of a social environment. So what we saw was an impact in people's behavior. And that was interesting. So while cyber is important, what it did do is that because of the controls that we were, and certainly in Western Europe, those digital signatures, we have legal frameworks to accept trust levels. So we have a lot more maturity in that. Certainly in Central Europe, I have customers in Russia, Ukraine, other places. I found different levels and different behaviors. What was interesting was that as we created this culture of remote working, people felt isolated. I had members of my team that I had to put forward for some counseling, some therapy. It was a higher workload in terms of internet never switches off. So you can imagine people working weekends, having to work longer hours. So whilst more than happy to talk about cybersecurity generally and on the whole, and yes, we have detective control, we have controls that can prevent things. One of the key things was a human factor. And so for me and my team, it was the fact that the new norm meant that they hardly ever saw each other. And that meant that I had to take care of their mental state, make sure that they were happy. Because certainly in Germany, we have regulatory compliance requirements. In Saudi, you've got different ways of working. So it does allow you to interact a lot more. Certainly you can't take everything to the cloud. So there's a bit of a mixture, but certainly in UK, you can work totally remotely. The laws are there. And of course, data privacy is obviously very mature, but that has led to that particular human factor. And I think in all of this, one of the biggest things that I've learned is that it has changed the way we think, and it has changed the way that we now behave. We are in lockdown in the UK right now. I'm stuck indoors until somewhere in the, I think they're going to probably extend it, but let's assume that they don't, but maybe the first week of December, it comes out. But that lockdown has created, those tensions, those issues that are more personal. And some people, especially those in the Middle East, where we are from, we have this culture of meeting people. With these security controls that are now in place, you can work anywhere, anytime. And with these lockdowns, I think one of the key areas I would say we need to focus on is the human factor, the human capital. How are people actually, adjusting to it? And I think that's something that I intend to do a lot more at Cisco with my team as well.
Yeah, and Khalid, I mean, you've touched upon a really important concept around mental health. I mean, obviously, with resilience and with the way that resilience has been implemented, within the region and globally, for that matter, around remote, one of the side, things to consider from that is mental health. Obviously, mental health, not just for cyber and IT, but also for the overall organizations, for people in their personal lives, and so on and so forth. So I'm glad that you brought that up, and the work that's being done in the organization and within your circle around mental health. Hadi, how about yourself? I mean, in these core months where the new normal is now being adopted, how have you seen, yourself and your experiences within the organization around the adoption of this new normal?
I think what Khalid mentioned from an isolation perspective, that's a global phenomena, because people started to work from their own rooms rather than meeting rooms and saying hello and hi, interacting with each other. So it wasn't a normal kind of environment. And what we did was we changed our entire communication strategy. We actually, IT went to our comms team and we sat together and we said, this is what we will do to start engaging with our employees and staff members. So that communication strategy was absolutely critical. If there's one thing I want to give out, one message, which is going to be communicate, communicate, and communicate with your team members, with your colleagues. The working from home guidelines were emphasized. We mentioned about that time and time again. We made sure we had security awareness campaigns going out, and we amplified the entire awareness program. And that was supposed to be done with all these new ways of working kicking in. We had to ensure that the security, phishing emails kicking in, with all of that. There are 56 million malware and phishing emails sent to the UAE in the first 6 months of 2020, which is 600% rise, which is not normal. So with all of these little risks increasing to a mammoth size, we had to ensure that our employees are fully up to date as to how to control and manage. We had to ensure security became everybody's responsibility, not just by an email message, but absolutely, hand-holding people, ensuring that they understand the security risk. The entire security team was having one-to-one sessions with employees. So that awareness had to be brought up to a level which was much higher than it was before the COVID-19 kicked in. And, it's very difficult to take the dogmatic approach and saying no to everything as a cyber perspective, but the business had to continue. So we had to take a pragmatic approach of different levels and ensure that there's continuity in place. And the normal BCP is not the right BCP plan for COVID-19 environment. I mean, BCP is when your site goes down, you have an alternate site where people can go and work from there. This was not the normal BCP. It was a different kind of a BCP, which had to be kicked in, and the entire strategy had to be changed.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm glad you touched upon this point, mentioning that cybersecurity or security is not just the responsibility of the CIO or the CISO or the security team. It is everyone's responsibility in the organization. And promoting that culture of security, or that culture of security and safety rather within an organization, is key. And organizations that are able to successfully articulate the fact that security and safety is everybody's responsibility have actually seen tremendous protection and awareness within their organization, within their employees around this culture, and great overall. Dawood, coming to you, I mean, one of the greatest success of Kuwait obviously was the extent of the lockdown and the way that measures were being controlled around movement and so forth. Coming back to these key months, how did you experience this within the region? What are some of the the key thoughts that you had around this time that you want to maybe articulate on and talk about overall?
Basically, Kuwait was one of the first countries to actually apply very high level, let's say, conservative laws when it came to tackling the COVID-19 situation. The reality was we did not have much experience, nor we were able to potentially fully visualize the situation. However, we knew two facts. COVID-19, you had to apply social distancing, and we had to leverage remote accesses to our employees. So during our discussion in the steering committees, we concluded three things. That when it comes to incident response, we need to prioritize our cybersecurity activities. So the highest priority would be to have a proper incident response plan that would focus on the critical elements and dodge the least important tasks. So that was the first focus. The second one was to identify the clear roles and responsibilities and assign the primary and secondary personnel for the critical activities as a minimum. And then the third one was to verify that our infrastructure was able to provide remote operations. When it came to learning, we learned two things. So the first thing we learned is that we need to have a very rapid incident response plan. So instead of using the traditional response strategy, we had to, let's say, remove the, how I should call it, the accessories part and focus on the critical elements. Because having potential lack of employees, because that was part of our risk assessment, meant that you would have more security cases to review and less time, more security cases and less time to review. And even if you equip yourself to work from home, we realized that the entire situation was totally different. Working from office is totally different than working from home. We quickly learned that employees do depend on each other when it comes to process their day-to-day operations. They like to discuss decisions together, like to double check on things before processing things. So we learned that employees have that psychological, thoughts in mind that they need their supervisors to be there around them physically when it came, to processing information. And this applied to cybersecurity. So, for example, we thought that in case an employee was sitting by himself, he might not make the right decisions, especially when it comes to getting alert on a malware. They might not make the right decision to call us and instead, ignore the alert and continue working. So also taking into consideration the different timing of employees, with the remote technology, you're giving the employee the leverage to access the information or the, when it comes to processing the data 24/7. So he might be accessing the system when actually nobody is available to support them. So in KIB, what we did is that we leveraged a collaboration tool that provided access to all the employees in case that they have inquiries. They could just, use that tool to get to the right person.
Great, yeah. And Dawood, I'm glad you mentioned, some of these key interesting points, especially around further strengthening the incident response plans, right? Introducing a faster way to execute upon the established incident response plans and revising them, obviously going them forward. And then obviously around the development of new collaboration tools to be able to walk some of these key things through. And that's, that's great in terms of some of the key concepts around this time and so forth overall. Some great insights from all of you. Really appreciate it. I mean, we've during this, during the adoption of the new normal, some of the key things that we've gone through is, I guess around, Hadi, from yourself, around being able to communicate as part of the team overall. Khalid, you touched upon some great points around, being able to provide mobility, mental health, making sure that your teams, your clients do understand that we are available, albeit remotely. However, we are available during these times, and nobody has quote unquote signed off, so to speak, and is available. There was a great notion mentioned, obviously from yourselves as well, that security is everyone's responsibility. I mean, and this pandemic has proved that organizations don't just need to have specific verticals, but also these verticals need to promote security and safety within the environment. And we need to make sure that our organizations adopt a culture of this normalization. And then obviously, Dawood, from your side, some great points around the incident response planning and being able to rapidly deploying and being able to change incident response during these uncertain kind of periods overall. All right, let's take the clock forward back into the current situation. Now that we have, passed, we're past March, we're past this these summer months where we're starting to understand, the new normal life, and now we're starting to see the economy opening up. Businesses are starting to pick up again. Obviously, mobility is now increasing. There must be things that keep you up at night. So I'm gonna keep it short. We'll start with yourself, Hadi. What is it these days that keeps you up at night?
Apart from my ambitions, from a cyber perspective, I think ransomware, ticks the box definitely, because that impacts the entire organization, and somebody taking control of my entire data is something slightly concerning in my view. So I would put that really upfront. I just feel that the adoption of technology has sporadically increased over the last few months. I mean, my grandparents now are savvy users of Zoom and internet banking and all of that. You know, who would have thought that my grandmother would be using online channels to transfer money and stuff like that and make payments? I mean, people buy groceries now online. So this is something which is new. The digital channels have, you know, increased tremendously, and we need to ensure that the controls around those new technologies, which we have welcomed so far, they also, you know, increase to that level. So in my view, I feel that you know, how we control the data which flows from our organization goes outside. In my view, DLP controls, data leakage prevention controls, classification controls of your crown jewels, they need to be amplified. They need to be ensured that people understand how you classify the sensitive cybercrime is something which is very critical for us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think your point around the adoption of digital channels, this has been widespread. I mean, organizations have adopted multiple digital channels. You know, where early on, where organizations had a particular digital channel, whether that be you know, Cisco WebEx, for example, or whatever the case may be. Now organizations have multiple digital channels to conduct the same activity. So there's a lot of resilience that has been embedded as part of you know, day-to-day business activities and operations. And certainly there's some of the things as you know, as the CIO and CISOs within the organizations, you will have had to look at some risk mitigation around these, and being able to look at these channels and the ability to transfer company data through the channels into you know, media outside the organization, now that people are working remotely. So that's great points overall. Khalid, how about yourself? I mean, now that you know, the markets are working towards a new normal, how do you see yourself, and what are some of the things that that you're working on that are taking up most of your nights?
So you know, pills have a good effect actually, so I sleep throughout if I have a good pill. But besides that, I think one of the key things is, to me at least, what I'm seeing and my customers are seeing, I think we have to do tabletop exercises that include the remote worker element. The threat modeling has to be mindful of that, which it hasn't been typically in the business continuity world, specifically in the business continuity world. I think the SOCs and the IR playbooks have to be reviewed, and I think we have to look at this again and look at the, as Hadi said and Dawood, that we now have a different threat actors and different threat vectors. As we open up to remote workers, we then ultimately create that bigger threat landscape. So that's, I think, another key thing. The other one that I'm seeing is the rush to cloud security. I'm seeing organizations quickly trying to ramp up. I mean, Amazon was actually one of the few companies that was rising in terms of its share prices. So what's happening? Cloud security's adoption of that is leading to, I think, misconfigured and perhaps lack of cybersecurity design patterns in terms of identity and access management. So absolutely, as Hadi says, data is key, specifically around where data actually, the data lifecycle, the information lifecycle is very key. But as is access and as identities become somewhat, difficult to control, and they are from partners, and you look at the partner ecosystem that now exists in the cloud world, I think, having to make sure that cloud security is really designed well, and that when we take that new measure, we do it securely. The other is to make sure that our tabletop exercises and our SOCs can actually contain, quickly enough, and ultimately identify, detect, and respond as fast as possible. The other thing we're certainly seeing is cyber insurance. We see cyber insurance, so we've got a number of breaches that are happening, and we see cybercrime, cyber insurance now taking a different route as well. So that, to me, I think those are the key things that we have to do, and make sure that we're well prepared when we do this red teaming and blue teaming exercises.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm glad you've touched upon the adoption of cloud. I mean, certainly, we have all experienced the, the rush around moving to cloud into, providing some responsibilities over to another provider that can guarantee uptime and availability during these times and being moving to. And we're seeing a lot of organizations moving into that direction. And obviously within the Middle East, there's a lot of cloud service providers that have been growing very well as well. I mean, we have Group 42, obviously, that is running these clouds instances and services. We have AWS being set up in regions like Bahrain, Microsoft being in UAE, and Oracle being planned in Saudi Arabia, and obviously some of the other ones and so forth overall. So glad you brought that point up, and some great insights there as well overall. Dawood, how about yourself? I mean, in terms of where we are now, what are some of the key measures that is being taken up? How do you see the adoption of the technology and some of the key things as part of our new normals around business operations?
Actually, right now we feel it's like a nightmare, to be honest. Especially with what COVID-19 has made us do, for example, provisioning of remote accesses. That's something we never thought that we would do for entire, for all the users. So, for example, when it came to remote accesses, we, by provisioning a remote access, also meant that we are increasing our attack surface. So, therefore, we wanted to take into consideration, for example, how to securely configure those technologies, monitoring the traffic and the user behavior when it came to those remote devices. The additional security requirements for the privileged users was a concern, and the biggest concern was to align with the regulatory requirement, especially us as an institute. It's a big thing for us to make sure that what we're doing satisfies the regulator. So we looked at different technologies at that time. We adopted, I consider myself as a state-of-the-art technology that allowed us to secure remote accesses, allowed us to enforce granular policy configuration, and it was easy to use. And that was a good element as well. But again, this was not enough. Attackers prey on human psychological flaws, where humans are considered the weakest link, as we all know. So despite that, we adopted a pioneering security remote solution, and but on the other side, we've been seeing an increase in, for example, phishing emails. We initially saw a high number of phishing email masquerading like as a COVID-19 theme. In the normal days, we used to see, for example, an email that says you have an invoice. Please click here and open that. Now, during the COVID-19, we saw new variants of phishing emails that says, hey, you've got for example, a coronavirus case in your neighboring town. Open it up to get more information, which, when you have, highly stressed employees or distracted employees, they will be attempted, to open those phishing emails. Therefore, the way we handle this or address this is that, first of all, we configured all our security parameters to detect those kind of phishing emails. And then we also conducted a large mass campaign when it came to how to detect phishing emails. So we created awareness messages. We ensured that the employees went through the phishing awareness program to ensure that they are well aware on how to identify a potential phishing email.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Dawood. And I think your points, specifically around regulatory requirements, ensuring that we provide flexibility to the weakest link, which is our, which is obviously the human factor, but at the same time, we don't circumvent any regulations or any requirements around protection of data and so forth overall. And that's some great points overall. And Khalid, I believe you also touched upon the cyber insurance that you've seen has been there's been an adoption of taking cyber insurance within the region, which is actually quite interesting. As I was actually in one of the conferences in Jordan early last year, and cyber insurance, has been relatively new in the region, but obviously with this, there has been widespread, adoption and acceleration of that overall and so forth. I'm glad that we've touched upon this, overall, and we've talked about all these different topics and gone through all these overall. We'd be happy to take any questions from the audience as well at this point in time, in case there's any, and so on and so forth. But until then, actually, Khalid, I would be interested to understand the pill that you're on, because I would really like to take that one as well, especially, allows you to sleep well at night. I mean, I think we all can use that a little bit.
You could do both. You could smoke it or take the pill. But anyway, let's not go there. It's illegal here. Look, I think we have a huge change going on, and I think one of the things that we're also seeing in the mega trends, we call it mega trends at Cisco, is also the privacy laws that are coming in. So we're seeing protectionism. Some would argue legalized IP theft by certain governments. And of course, the mega trends with protectionism, which is creating what we in Cisco call, a global thing going on, mega trend. And so it becomes incredibly important to create segmentation strategies that ensure what Hadi touched on, how your data and your privacy of that data is kept. So obviously, as a global organization, our customers are global, biggest banks in the world and biggest insurers in the world, and we have a lot of those sort of organizations. We're now helping them ensure that they are segmented to be able to take advantage of the mega trends, which includes COVID-19, but more importantly, the protectionism and the privacy laws that are coming up.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's
and then
great.
You take the pill, and then that takes you, you have a nice sleep.
Absolutely. No, that's great. There's some good questions that have come in from the audience. Maybe Hadi, I would like to direct one of them to you, and this is around gamification. Now, training employees through the natural employee training awareness and so forth has certain benefits. But what's the overall experience around using gamification methods and being able to use gamification for training?
So that's a good question. I personally feel, as an end user, going through that slide after slide after slide, clicking yes and a quiz in the end becomes dull and boring. And I've seen people, just doing next, going to the end questions, using their, IQ and answering the questions, failing it, going back, passing the test, and, getting a tick in the box. We can't really do that. We have to make things interactive. We have to involve people. We have to ensure we give them the mindset, the environment they work in, and the risk, as Dawood mentioned very clearly, that the risk in today's environment are very, very real life issues. So we need to ensure that we have interactive sessions. We bring in people in a room. We show them the exact scenario they're going through and put them through that competition with each other, where they can score if they get the wrong answer, and if they get the right answer, they get rewards as well. And it's linked with your performance management at the same time. So they take it seriously. It is not just a tick in the box exercise. So I think having that interactive session with involving your entire workforce is extremely important. Gone are the days where we send an email out once in a month saying, don't click on this link and don't do anything wrong, and make sure your passwords are protected, and don't share your password on a post-it note right here. So all these things, we have to ensure we change the mindset and make people more involved in these exercises, which are now out there. Every new top awareness program has gamification part of that exercise.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Hadi. No, that's great. That's great. Dawood, maybe we can take one more question to discuss, and this would be particularly around threat hunting. How do you see the change of threat hunting? Maybe just a short overview around threat hunting, being adopted currently within operations, cyber operations.
The threat hunting itself, as in terms of effectiveness and ensuring that you are doing or you are able to identify the right threat, is deploying a robust endpoint security and taking that and correlating it with your other available logs. So I think having a strong endpoint security that is able to correlate the events that we have in the system with the other systems can give you a clearer vision of what is happening in your network.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and that's great. And look, I think we're just getting close to time. Maybe just to summarize and wrap up. I mean, I'm glad to have had this discussion with all of you. It's amazing to hear from 65 plus years of experience in the room that we're talking to, and we've touched upon all the way. We started from all the way from March when we started to experience lockdown protocols, and then we've made our way all the way into the core summer months where new normal is being adopted, and then all the way to the end where we are right now, where we have the new way of working, and what are some of the challenges that we're seeing from a cyber perspective. Folks, as you heard and as you've seen, some of the great concepts that have been touched upon, ensuring security is everyone's responsibility, adoption of digital tools and digital acceleration tools within the region, and at the same time being able to provide security and safety within the organizations through the security teams to employees that are mobile and need to be mobile, and so on and so forth overall. Khalid Khan, Dawood, Hadi Anwar, really thank you for your time today. Some great insights you all have shared with us today. And also to your organizations for taking the time to be with us. So obviously Khalid from Cisco, Hadi from Group 42, Dawood from Kuwait National Bank, and at the time I was thank PwC MiddleEast for having us all here. And lastly, just want to highlight the event has been powered by, this specific panel has been powered by Refugee Girls Worldwide, which is a global not-for-profit organization that is providing services to the underprivileged and the unfortunate refugee girls that have been displaced and during unfortunate situations and wars. One of the greatest programs that is currently undergoing at Refugee Girls Worldwide is the sponsorship of camps along the Turkish border for refugee women and girls that have been affected by the war in Syria overall, and so on and so forth. And you can learn more about that by visiting the links around Refugee Girls Worldwide, and so forth overall. I'm glad that you all have found this this panel helpful. Thank you all for your time. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll speak soon on something else interesting. Tune in for the next upcoming panels that are coming over. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ali.
Thank you
very much.